Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. It's me, Jason Paul. Now, today's conversation is all about spiritualism, and spiritualism can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Here in the UK, it is a recognised religion and has been for a number of years. And, I always think that we're very lucky in this country to have spiritualism recognised as a religion. And in this country, it's called the Spiritualist National Union. And my granddad, who I've spoken a lot about in this podcast, who's I feel like I've taken over from him in the world of mediumship. His passing is very much what activated my mediumship, and he served churches. I'm only coming to realise now just the sheer amount of churches he did serve, actually, because I'm getting clues along the way from him in the spirit world, and also from people that I meet. So I first came into the world of mediumship really upon visiting the Arthur Findlay College, and the Arthur Findlay College is controlled by the SNU. The SNU has a president, and that president is elected, and that is the person who heads up the churches ultimately and the college. So in this conversation today, I'm speaking to Donna King, who has a lifelong connection to the Spiritualist National Union, and she's been attending spiritualist churches really from childhood. She went to the college for over 20 years. It's actually the very place where we met, and so many like-minded souls do meet. It's not, mediumship is one of these things that isn't accessible in a lot of places. So the college, especially, and the churches means a lot to people. It's people's religion. People have dedicated their life. And, I always think that spiritualism is very unique in the fact that, we're serving the spirit world here. And what did the spirit world teach us? It's all about love, light and truth. And that is what I ultimately stand for. That is what the SNU is meant to stand for. The principles of such. Everything I ever want to do in my life is in search of truth. I've taken over my lifetime enough untruths, and I think in the world we live in now, there's so many of them, that truth matters, and that's what I'm ever in the quest of myself. Donna King, welcome back to the Soul Sync.
Hello, Jason.
Oh, it's lovely to have you. Obviously, you've been a massive influence on my mediumship, I'll say from the get-go, because you put things very matter of fact. And that's what I love about you, in the way that you communicate spirit. It's spirit, firstly, that you're talking from, and just the way you put things. And I know that you've come on today, and what we spoke about before was beautiful. And I said, please come back on. And you've agreed. So it's very nice. You've come on today to talk about matters close to your heart.
Yeah. In relation to spiritualism and our principles and the SNU.
I guess, I want to say from the get-go that, I feel that obviously there's elections coming up in the SNU, and, I never really talk about this kind of stuff myself on the Soul Sync about, I'm not one to get involved in politics. I'm much more one to get involved in fairy tales and put together an intro that immerses you somewhere that I'm trying to make you think isn't on planet Earth. But I'm not really someone to talk about that. But I wanted you to come on today because, firstly, some of what you're going to talk about, I have seen myself. And, I think that everyone, should have an opportunity to share their views. And I feel that what you want to come on to talk about today is spirit, the SNU, and, the heritage of it, and what was it, and what, is it now, and where is it going, and how all of these kind of different threads, kind of come together. So let's start at the beginning. The SNU, what is that to you?
I mean, I first attended an SNU church when I was 6 or 7 years of age. I was.
And I'll say SNU, if anyone's listening, by the way, it's the Spiritualist National Union that run the Arthur Findlay College and the also run all the churches. And it is a religion in England. And that's what makes England so much of a hub for spiritualism, the fact that we recognise it as a religion. So on that note, Donna King, you first came to you at 6 years old.
Yeah, because obviously I'd already been connecting with spirit from like younger years, so I was taken to a spiritualist church, and that really was where the churches was the first introduction for me. And then that continued to happen. Probably didn't happen for a few years after that, but then it continued to happen through my early years and through my teens, and then on and off through my whole life. I may add that the SNU has only been a recognised religion for a number of years. When I was a lot younger, it wasn't recognised. That was quite a marking point in our religion. Faith, religion, whatever people want to call it.
Well, what was it before that? Because
well, it was just the charity in itself. I suppose. I don't.
Like an institution, a charity.
Yeah, but it wasn't recognised as a religion. That was quite a marking point for us when that was then changed to recognised.
And now it is obviously a religion as well as a charity.
Well, yeah, religion being a bit of an operative word for me, but yeah, a faith, a believing and knowing, But yeah, for me, that was really the case. Obviously, I mean, I was asked what religion I was. I may have said this before when I was 11, and Spirit just said spiritualist. So I just said I was a spiritualist and just rolled with it. But then we'd look in the dictionary to see what that meant. I had to actually look in a thesaurus for that one, I believe, because it was the bigger book.
Well, yes.
Google showing my age.
Well, no, you didn't have Google back then. You'd be.
No, we did not.
In your local library. And, I was very bad at returning my library books. I'll tell you that. I used to have I was always had ones that are overdue or the ends would be mangled or whatever.
Yeah, it was like the library was a weekly occurrence, really. But yeah, for me, it's being spiritualist for me. I can feel the emotions rise in my chest. For me, it is everything. It is the heart of who I am, really, because all I've ever really sought to do through my life, being always connected with spirit, is serve. We'll get into the too much personal, but I was the one that always would go out of their way to befriend the one nobody else wanted to be friends with. Always really, in a way, being led in that. With numerous stories behind every single one of them, really. Being the story of my life until I got to a point where I was like, right, we're not doing this anymore. Always being the healer and thing. But in my younger years at primary school, they were not such harsh lessons in helping people and befriending them. But that was just because I was always spirit led, so in a way I have always, in the weirdest way, always been of service. Obviously, I have come on to sort of speak on the issue that I had at college, been attending the Arthur Findlay College since my daughter is 26. So I think she was about 3 years old. So let's just approximate 20 years. It's a few more.
Well, because how I met you, was obviously at the Arthur Findlay College, and it was at a time in my development, and I say, development, unfoldment, whatever you want to call it, but I'd been on either one or two courses, and I came for a weekend course, and it was, I will never forget, it was Colin Bates that was our tutor, and the beauty and the elegance of Colin and just his humor and how he put stuff, it always stood out to me. But Colin and many, well, I think nearly all the tutors of that weekend are no longer at the college because of, which is sad. But that's how I first came to meet you. And as I've got to know you, through the unfoldment again of my mediumship, I know that the spirit world and the SNU and spiritualism and the college that you rightly said that you've attended for, 20 years, it all matters to you very deeply, doesn't it?
We'll be right back.
Hello, my darlings. I'm launching a brand new monthly newsletter. Think of it as SoulSync in your inbox once a month. Or we'll be like pen pals. I'll tell you what I'm up to in my mediumship, what I've been doing over the month. There'll be free meditation downloads, events. Sign up jasonpaulmedium.com down at the bottom of the homepage, and I'll see you there.
Yeah, and I've served on the committee. I went out of my way to help Peterborough Church while being on the committee, holding the circle, never once taking 1p for petrol, anything. While just separating with 4 children under the age of 11 as a single parent, struggling in that financially, finding myself in a very different situation, and never once, sought to take a penny from them because the church was struggling. It was a fight to keep it open. It did end up closing, unfortunately, but putting my only money into it, baking, making the cake, and what I say, and rightly so, because at the time the church needed it, So when given the opportunity and life's allowed, I have gone out of my way in other ways, to help our churches. But yeah, I mean, we can think that things, obviously, with me being banned from the college for making reference to the food in that it appeared like F rabbit shit. Can I say that? You can
say whatever you want. I can put one of those things on it where I think it's explicit. Yeah, at this moment, unfortunately, you've become over 18 only on this episode. Yes, yes, but you can say what the bloody hell you want, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I'll take no shame in swearing, it's part
No, I don't. I love a
who
good
I
bloody
am,
swear. My mum tells me off for it. But there's nothing wrong with a swear word, as long as it's appropriate, it's not offensive, it's not, whatever. I don't go round Tesco's,
as long as you're not being offensive in it. I mean, and when I said it, it was kind of in like shock and jest at what we was being served, because let's be honest, it did resemble. It was like, what is that? As I know now, they now label the foods. People do know.
So what are you saying happened here, so I can understand this, and people listening can understand this clearly?
Well, obviously you're closely linked, because I'm never one for standing in the queue. None of us are ever that hungry there.
Right. So you're talking about the Arthur Findlay College. You were on a course,
at lunchtime, and getting up at the very end when everybody's finished, collecting their food, and you and me got up, and it was. What is, I was like, what is that rubbish shit? Like, what is that? And laughing. And it was just said very openly. And he's like, oh yeah, he said, I know it's crispy jelly beef. It was actually agreement that thing, because it was the only option. If I remember rightly, that was the only option. And I was a bit like, Jesus, here we go. Another meal, not eating. And I don't want to get into the moaning about the food, because, it wouldn't be, this probably the worst week for the food. But, over all the years I've been there, it's not the first time that I would feel that, it was of poor quality. And it is what it is, isn't it? It is what it is. It's in the grand scheme of life, it's a small thing to moan about.
Well, yeah. So what you're essentially saying is we were on a college course.
Yeah.
We the food was really, really not great, and not to the point that it wasn't, just not nice. We're not sort of sitting here as food critics or Michelin star chefs here.
No, and I really don't care. Yeah.
We're talking about, and the college for me is a place of spiritual sanctuary. It's a place of being grateful. It's a place of appreciation. You understand that the food is what it is. But what we're saying, what Donna is saying here, is there was an issue raised with the food by her, and then that was that. And please continue the story from there on in.
Yeah. Well, then there was another student who asked me to go up with him while he spoke to the manager. And he was fairly enough upset, And so, he made that known. And then we went and sat back down. And I had already taken myself and a couple of students to the shop whereby we bought some other foods, which the staff were lovely enough because they was actually in agreement that how bad it was that they weren't actually eating it, the dining room staff, I must add, because obviously I do talk to the staff a lot, all of them, from the cleaners, etc. I've always held conversation and I've had good relations with them. And so that they did, because they're good people, put the food and stuff in the fridge for a couple of other students. So obviously I won't mention their names. And then we was reprimanded when we went into class about swearing. And that was it. It felt like the matter was over with. I reiterated to the staff, the young lad. And it just feels very tiresome even going into it because I did say to him, I didn't swear at you. And he was like, no, I know you didn't, but I just we told we have to report swearing. And I was like, okay. I said, just as long as I've been coming here for this, but I would never swear at you, and, reeled off some of the dining room staff's names, and how much regard I've got for them because there's times when I haven't wanted to eat what is on offer in previous times, and the staff will go and get me a roll and some bread and a bit of cheese or something, just so that I've got something that I do feel like is palatable. And I say that I feel awful saying that, but it's true, more appropriate for me for a lunchtime. There's some heavy eating there, it's 3 full cooked meals you can eat a day.
So yeah, normally when I go there, I put on a couple of well, let's say this: my jeans aren't doing up normally on the drive home.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling bloated for at least a couple of days when I sort of depressurize back into the atmosphere of my home environment.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, obviously, they're escalated because we was due to attend a trance course several weeks later, and 2 weeks prior, I got an email stating that I'd been banned from the college. And that's where we go on to, they're being told by, one member of staff that actually it was the CEO that had made the decision, and then being told by the CEO that it was the dining staff that had been made that decision, and then by another member of staff telling me that actually, no, it wasn't their decision. It was that person's decision. And anyway, then we went into emails of exchange because after phone calls, I was told numerous phone calls, I was left sort of hanging on 2 occasions. And then it was like, no, which was really ill fair because I was willing to sit down, discuss with people and have a conversation and sort of like, let's talk it out, because it was not grounds to be banned from a college, which is the hub of our religion. Let's be honest. That's the hub of the religion. I can only attend one church, which I have served, Norwich. I've done a service there many years ago now. It just wasn't justified. The action, the cause did not warrant the action whatsoever. But anyway, we went on, and then CCTV was miraculously deleted or gone, even though that had been specifically requested from the start. And here we are, really. For all intended purposes, I don't agree and haven't agreed with anything for a lot of things that the CEO has been doing, in my own opinion, prior to that. And I should imagine, because I've never done a course with her, that may have been part of the factor. She's totally convinced herself of that to be true. I don't know. I do know from members of staff have told people to let me know that it was not their decision, which I totally believed anyway, because I know that I've always taken the time to speak to so many staff, and it is very upsetting. It's very upsetting for me. I've adjusted to it now. It's okay. But obviously, it is, I'm not the only victim at this point. That is now, not that I'm a victim per se, but not the only person really at this point that's obviously had to leave, been made to leave, forced to leave, banned, sacked, whatever domain or bracket you may come into.
Well, I guess what we're talking about here, to cut through the noise, is the current president, the chairman, Jackie Wright, to people that are kind of familiar, like we said, with the SNU, the Arthur Findlay College, so on. Jackie Wright is the president. This coming July, I believe it is, there is an upcoming election. I'm going to say this, all views are our own, etc., etc. However, what Donna is talking about here is an incident in which the food was, quite frankly, appalling, as I saw myself, because I was on the same course. And, that was raised. Matters were dealt with as I saw it. And then Donna came to be banned from the college. And, from what I have observed, to me, it feels completely unholy, unjust, totally out of line with the principles, the values of the SNU, what spiritualism is all about. I feel that the matter has been dealt with not only in totally the wrong way. I also feel that legal, I guess what I'm trying to say here is, even when you raise things like issues with the management, the complaints process or whatever, things are not being dealt with properly, is what you're trying to say as well. And even, your experiences and what we're trying to, and I guess what the whole theme and thread of this episode is about talking about the SNU, talking about your experiences of being bad and what that's led you on to discover as well. Because there is an issue there. There is an issue whereby there's been a mass exodus of tutors, because it was about a couple of years ago now. There was a social media post that went out where all the tutors walked out over a employment matter, which is still yet to be heard in court, which obviously we can't discuss because there's ongoing proceedings. But, from what I understand of it, there's serious questions to answer, so on that note, Donna,
along with other obvious litigating factors of the AMG live, the live meeting AMG, and the admittance to the berating of a student, and the non-disclosure and the paying of the money to compensate said student, the alleged, and I will say strongly alleged because there is no evidence of it, assault of a member of staff. And even in it being alleged and potentially that never actually happened, which is high, as much likely as it is unlikely. I don't know Jackie Wright personally, but the fact that it's even come up, that somebody would even suggest it, that hundreds of thousands of pounds are not accountable, according to Spiritualism Link. Money, in excess of £30,000 being given to charities that are actually worth a considerable amount more than our charity, in excess of 90 million. All of these things can be found on Spiritualism Link. It goes on, the train goes on of factors. And it just leads to question of, how is she as an individual even suitable to be held, can even be considered a president for the SNU, when even in my own situation, I took personal responsibility. And I have got a room, there's numerous people in that room that I could ask that was witness to my accountability for that, my apology. And I know the staff know that I apologised. And I spoke to the dining manager at the time, Courtney. And I have actually since, held conversation with a couple of members of staff via phone calls in relation to it, may I add. So I know there is obviously a conflict of words, people accused of doing the same things that they haven't done, and it goes on. There's, people being sacked for, wanting to do their jobs that they was already doing and being told, no, you're not doing that now. I mean, the momentum of people are calling it a dictatorship. And I do want to remember, I'm not going to say it, and I know, I've already come up against some adversity with this, but I want to add, and I feel very emotional as I say it, she is a soul with a purpose. So whether we, as humans believe that what she is doing is right, and whether how wrong that may be, and some of the very, what I would feel, my heart would feel very ill and poor behavior to, to others, other people. She is, and does believe that what she is doing is right. So her soul has come along to what I believe is to sort of create a destruction so that things can actually be rebuilt properly. So for me, in that, there must be some honor for her as a soul in taking that bashing, because whether she believes that she's doing the right thing, and she can't see that she knows that there's mistruths in things that she does and says, and then that's her journey, that's her story. And I want to be very clear on that, because I'm not here being a Jackie Wright basher and hater, and I do feel very emotional in that, because the emphasis of our faith and religion is to be loving, being peace and love and understanding, and that then means to be understanding of those, even those that cause us, disharmony, pain, whatever the case may be. And, I think people have very much lost sight of that with, the situation. And I know a lot of people have been hurt, but, that is part of their journey. And we do know, the worst, you're not learning when it's all good. You're learning when it's painful. And so those that I am absolutely positive, and I have been through some severe traumas in my life, but I'm absolutely positive that when I leave, because I do know the immensity of that love and peace cannot be touched here on earth, that is in spirit, that actually it will probably be those that have caused me the most pain in this work, in this life, the ones I thank first, because they are the ones that have taught me and so given me the most as a soul to grow, learn, and develop. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? I mean, if not,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing here.
I do have to say, I personally feel that the treatment that you have received from Jackie Wright and from the SNU to just be so just wrong on so many levels, morally, ethically, I want to say legally, at the end of the day, we have to be careful what we discuss here, but there is an ongoing legal case of, a good 20 tutors who are currently, have got matters, ongoing civil cases against the SNU and the college. And I think there's a number of these. And I think that what there has been, I'm not someone who buries my head in social media, as you can probably tell by the lack of social media content that I'm currently putting out, and the forever mediumship videos that I forever keep promising that are going to materialize at some point. But that to one side, what you're raising here is, and there's been lots of talk about it online, about serious allegations about, things you would just not expect from someone who is leading such an institution.
Absolutely. I mean, we are in a time of change. We are in time of considerable change, even in the way the spirit moved through me sometimes is beyond my own comprehension. I'm still adjusting to this, but we are in a time of considerable change. And, and Gordon Higginson did prophesize, I'm going to bring it out, I have said it on Facebook, but Gordon Higginson did prophesize that the SNU's name would be destroyed. And without going into it, he basically said that the churches would be renamed Centers of Light. And I was only told that. I wasn't aware of that when I was trying to reassure somebody that, that the things would come, do full circle, because Gordon had showed me very clearly in a deep trance state, if you like, prior to working, just light re-entering the building. And it was entering all of the walls of the college. And he was reassuring me, and I feel really emotional in that, reassuring me that change would come. And this was prior to me being kicked out. And I'm laughing, but I say it thinking, Bob, it's been one of the most heartbreaking times. House to me is home. The first time I attended, within the first hour of being there, I had the coming home feeling, which wiped the floor with me. And so I have a connection to the building per se, as some of us do, and some of us would know about. But yeah, it's challenging times for the SNU. I do feel that there's potentially more to come. I know that we're obviously now in a position of people voting for the re-election, and there is, there's strong pushing from what I can see from my Facebook for Julia Ormond. I don't know her personally, but I have met her, and she, briefly at the college, and she did seem like a nice lady. But on word of people whose integrity and morals I do trust, I trust their judgment, and so she'll not that I can vote because I didn't renew my membership quickly enough after last council after it last ended, but she'll have my standing vote, if you like, from the sidelines. I just know that with the change, regardless, Spirit have made it very clear to me, because I can feel them coming in there, that what needs to be said is that there is change on the horizon here that leads to, a greater body of people in lead of, of the college. And because we need, always the nominated trustees on the board, and then we need the circle above running it. It needs to be bodies of people, because then we could never fall into this position again. And I just feel very strongly here, because I think with Spirit, they've made it very clear to me that needs to happen now, because we need to move into a time of change. And it's clear that there's always, one person always, through the years, prior to Jackie Wright, there'd always be something said about whoever was in charge. Never to this, extent, ever. I mean, for somebody that said she was going to keep churches open, we've got quite a few sold, and now the Barbanel's being sold. So I don't know, beggars belief really that it's all going on and what is happening with that. I have actually, and I will say it because it's of no matter, I have done numerous freedom of information requests to try and get, just some data and some facts to see if we can put some more stuff down into facts as to what is actually going on, just to make some answers clear in my own head, because some of these things are, and I should possibly put it down, but it matters to me. The building matters to me. My faith matters to me. And it's the body of what I do and who I am. And,
well, the college, the SNU, means a lot to a lot of people. The history of the building, if you haven't been to the Arthur Findlay College before, it is like a building like no other. It's, the closest thing I can, liken it to is Hogwarts. That is the only thing I can ever think to compare it to, because everything outside of it really is a muggle, aren't they?
Yeah,
they are.
So they say.
They are, and it's got an energy about it. It's got a significance about it, and it's for that reason, I feel that one person at the top of such an institution, given the type of institution it is, it's an educational institution in some ways, that college, and even spiritualism, I don't feel that it makes sense for one person to own that, to be at the top of that. Yeah. I feel that then shifts power balance and whatever. It's needs to be a committee, a body of people, or whatever, however you want to dress it up, but it can't be one person, because I feel that that's the only way to ever run something in a way is to have a kind of democracy. That's what it needs.
I do know that this will be the case. I trust that fully, because I've kind of seen it. So I've seen this change, and I trust that. I don't know when, how we get there, what happens. I do know that I'm willing to sort of sit back and argue anybody. Even,
well, I must say,
that all of this is. Case.
Well, yeah, and I know that it's almost like I kind of feel that you're too scared to sort of talk out. Seems to be the common theme of what I'm finding. If you dare speak out, ask any questions.
Yeah.
If they don't like questions. That's what for an institution that likes to have answers to questions, they don't seem to have a lot at times. I will say that. But they do proclaim to have all the answers, but they can have the answers to none of the questions. It's all very puzzling, very puzzling. But, make of that as you will. So, as you said, the reason I wanted to get you on is because, what you wanted to talk about today is the SNU, the Arthur Findlay College. It means a lot to a lot of people. I know the college means a great deal to all of the 20 tutors who have left. I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure there's a story to be told there. Of course there is. And I'm sure when the time comes, they will speak that. But what I'm all about here on the Soul Sync is truth. This is the truth channel, I like to think. Again, I don't proclaim to have all the answers, but I like to think that what I'm saying is true, at least to me. And I think that's what's important. And, I think that people need to, who, have a membership, who, have the ability to have a say, every voice matters, I think. And, and I feel that people should be encouraged to, discuss these matters. It matters to people. And like you say, it's a lot of people's religion. And to me, it's the closest thing I've got to a religion, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's true that it needs, there needs to be considerable change. It isn't just about the way it's led. There needs to be change in the way, because of the enormity of the change that's going on in the world. There needs to be change. People are learning to honor themselves first. And so that needs to then move into them old stigmata ways of, oh, you mustn't get up and leave the room. And I admittedly, I know there is people that will get up and be very disruptive in doing so. And, and people will look at them with judgment, like, what's your problem? But you never know quite what's going on with that person in that moment. There needs to be more honoring the self and allowing people to do that. Because I just feel...
What do you mean by honoring the self? People, what do you mean by that?
How do I feel? What suits me in the moment? Am I comfortable with this moment? Do I need to leave?
Some people would mistake this for being selfish.
Well, they would, but that's very much because obviously that's generally the way of the world. It's to me, it's moving into and I'm very old fashioned. You don't have to see the wall behind me to know.
Well, yeah, you don't even have a kettle, do you? You just boil it on the hob like one of those. And he makes the noise like you wouldn't be staying at my house with a kettle that sounded that loud. I'll tell you, it might get me out of bed in the morning.
I do prefer the whistling kettle. Some of them sound like a bird, but anyway.
See, I read that psychically. You see what I did there?
Yeah, I'm after a new one. That you very did there actually. But yeah, you could seem disrespectful, but we must remember that in the current time of and the way what's going on in the world and how people are moving through their lives and how things are changing a lot for everybody, mentally, emotionally, just in general in the day.
But there's a lot going on in the world right now, isn't there?
God, people are struggling. It goes on and on and on.
I think you need to really just protect your energy at the moment, and when you talk about take care of yourself. The way I see that now is
individually.
I do what I want to do, and I know this sounds crazy, but if I've got set in my diary and on that day I'm just not feeling like doing it, I do really try and not do that. But I always say to myself, I'm going to do what I feel. And some days, if I'm energetically feeling a certain way or whatever, I do just do what I feel. I'm a nightmare with ADHD as well. The amount of theatre shows that I've left at the interval because they haven't kept my attention enough, that's crazy, isn't it? But honestly, you put me in a theatre seat, because this is an audio experience, so many people aren't going to realise that I'm, a very tall person and I've got much longer legs than I have upper body. And you put me in one of those West End theatre seats and, I'm not comfortable. Let's say from the moment I've sat down, I'm already at discomfort. So...
And we know you and me are very alike like that,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of shows it's got to keep my attention. I think the ones that keep my attention, the musicals, because there's music, stuff going on. Because the other day, with a few people from work, I went to see The Woman in Black, and I didn't realise it's just two people acting out a story, and it just didn't keep my attention at all. And although it was a bit jumpy at points, I was just sitting there going, oh, God, this is so boring. Like, because it just wasn't... That's really bad to admit that, isn't it?
You're good at doing that.
I know, it just wasn't keeping my attention.
Sorry,
Obviously, I
Jason.
didn't walk out. I did watch it, but I just thought, oh, it's not really. I can kind of, it's just sort of.
Yeah.
There's not
Well,
really a
that's
lot
kind
going on. It's just two men and a couple of props.
the music
They're
is
very
so
good.
much
They were
better.
very good. Don't get me wrong. But
but boring. But yeah,
well, it
it's-
wasn't keeping my attention. At
Yeah.
points, it was, but I was trailing off. So look, I guess the more.
I mean, I do, just to sum it up, I do feel that in the art of learning to love oneself wholly and truly, you're honoring yourself in any given moment is the key. And that, even if it means, oh God, that looks like fucking rubbish shit, like even if it is that in jest, because it was my humor, it was my way of feeling like, oh my God, it's another meal I'm not eating, and I
Well, yeah, well, do you know?
fair and stuff, but
yeah.
I think it's imperative at this time. It's also a big massive factor. It seems to be coming up a lot around me, and I just keep trying to push people to do that because that is self-love,
So I guess how in usual Soul Sync style would you like to close this episode today?
Well, I do believe that there is the SNU really is just been destroyed, and it is a mockery, of everything that our principles and we are meant to thing. And I say that with love and peace and understanding for all. But I just do feel that is where we are, in the grand scheme of change. And I have said it, and even if the 20 when I'm going to say them 20 teachers walk back in, and
well, I would love the 20
around,
teachers to walk back in, because actually there's so many of them I really just love. They're just great mediums, great teachers, wholehearted individuals. And
they absolutely will be back. I know my connection to spirit I've been doing this too long to doubt what I do, and that's something else there's a whole nother conversation, because as humans, people go back to almost like that's the way we should think. Well, actually, we're taught that we should trust what we get and what we're being given by spirit. So why then, when it suits the human to ignore that, do we do that? And why then are we not running the SNU with more honest what spirit wants, even down to the teaching, the way that's done? You basically continually making spirit jump through hoops to say we're here and we're doing this with this individual. And I do find it amusing, because I just feel there's not enough in spirit, for spirit, in trusting that and what we get, which to me is a little bit thing, but I could go on. So I just feel with that there is there is considerable change, and even if I needed to argue and dispute against them 20 beautiful heart-led teachers that have walked out and have got legalities going on, I will argue that it needs to change. Well, not argue, but dispute that it needs to change in the way it's managed and run, because Spirit have made that very clear to me. And I know they have many other ideas about changes that need to be brought in to bring in the new, the time of change, the time of the new. And I just won't go into that because we could be here all day.
I just say to the spirit world, help us as much as you possibly can, because goodness knows we need it down here. We really, really do.
Trust the journey, Jason. Trust in the journey.
Trust in the journey. Donna King, thanks for coming on to the Soul Sync.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jason.
Hello there, Soul Sync, it's me. I interrupt this episode for just a moment to ask, if you find this podcast at all helpful, please leave a review on the platform where you listen to them. It helps other people to find it, and it means the world to me. Now enjoy your episode.